What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Against the weaker nations, they'd even levy punishing taxes or conscript their populations into military service in the name of monster hunting. It was a perfectly legal way to subjugate one nation under the rule of a stronger one. All the conditions were in place. There were no outstanding issues to deal with. Maribel's plan to economically rule over the nations in the Council of the West was proceeding along fine. Even Granville was happy with it. They had spent the past few years completing the groundwork for it. And now, with the rise of Rimuru and his nation of monsters, it was all going haywire. Maybe things weren't in crisis mode yet, but Maribel could see what was in store. The Demon Lord Rimuru would likely offer the Western nations their defensive support, in a bid to win their trust. With all that military power in the backdrop, he'd have them open up an economic relationship, to a certain extent, using Bloomond, a small kingdom, as a foothold into the West. He'd run all the logistics, give his people the joy of working, and guarantee their safety. I wish he wouldn't mess with me, Maribel thought. Other large nations, like Dwargon and Thalion, were already complete, permanent packages. She may not have liked them, but she could accept them. But right now, Tempest was riding straight into Maribel and her companions' home turf. If they expressed a desire to join the Council of the West, it'd be like torching their personal hunting grounds. A declaration of war. She refused to accept that. She was sure that she and the Demon Lord Rimuru were incompatible with each other at the core. There could only be just one ruler, a single, overwhelming force. You had to be the one calling the shots, or else you were never promised a sure victory. And as long as the Razo family was attempting to rule all of humanity, Rimuru would always be an obstacle. Even if they could work in harmony at first, it was clear to her that they'd grow apart over their respective interests. That was why Maribel saw the Demon Lord Rimuru as such a threat. It was easy to say she'd eliminate Rimuru, but actually doing it was much harder. She had participated in the Founders' Festival, so she could have a chance to observe him. It took some convincing with Granville, but he gave his okay after she promised not to do anything to Rimuru. The visit convinced her that she was right all along. Tempest was just too attractive of a city, brimming with desires, and in time it had become the cutting edge of trends, building a new age for the whole world. The more they opened up and forged deeper relations with other nations, the more valuable it had become, and before long, the Razos would no longer be able to make unilateral decisions. Yes. Everything's going the way the Demon Lord Rimuru wants it. The mere thought made Maribel want to fly into a rage. She resisted the urge as she pondered how to respond. Defeating him was out of the question. Even if they succeeded, they had no idea how Veldora would respond. Letting a monster capable of wiping out a force of 20,000 elites single-handedly go around unfettered was the height of folly. So that left rendering him harmless, either through coercion or persuasion. If they opted for coercion, Duke Muse's failures offered some important lessons. Maribel had perfectly set the table, hoping to indebt Rimuru in a way that followed every rule. Instead, Rimuru followed the rules to take revenge. The Duke was a fool for misreading the opportunity, but what really deserved praise was the personal connections Rimuru enjoyed. Yes, if there's a snake in the grass, you'd have to be a fool to prod at it. And now the Demon Lord wanted to join the council. It was easy to oppose that. Maribel had cornered the market for grain, in anticipation of upcoming wars. Now, thanks to Pharmace's civil war, the marketplace was having to turn to private stores to keep their shelves full. Maybe we should disguise people as night bandits and have them torch the villages around the big cities. That way, they could keep raising the prices of staple foods, as well as restrict the amount of bread that entered the market. With the smaller nations, just a little bit of tightening could lead to major food distress. When people lacked food, they got angry, and that anger was directed at the people who started the war. There was nothing easier than riling up the unintelligent masses, and pinning all the blame on Rimuru would be a straightforward task. And then, voila, the representatives from those smaller nations would oppose Rimuru's council bid. It'd be perfectly simple for Maribel to engineer. But, no. It used to be a given that you couldn't magically transport food, but I guess that Demon Lords made it happen. Judging by the sheer variety on offer in their dinner banquets, I think it's safe to assume that. And given his connections to people as big as King Gazel and Elmesia of Thalion, accepting him would probably lead to fewer problems. Engineering food shortages in the smaller nations could just give Rimuru a chance to provide them with support. If they scoffed at that plan and tried to coerce him out of it, they'd just be repeating Duke Muse's error. As Maribel concluded, trying something that already failed once could very easily come back to bite them. She wasn't self-absorbed enough to think she could carry everything out flawlessly. All she needed to do was proceed slowly, methodically, and carefully. With that in mind, winning Rimuru over to her side seemed more doable. If we want to sway him, we should try meeting with him and offering a chance to join a united front. If I'm willing to compromise a little, no, I can't do that. No need to be timid. I'm Maribel the Greedy. Whether he's a demon lord or not, I swear I can rule over him. There's no other option, she thought. The unique skill Avarice could freely control its target, ruling over their desires and making them do their bidding. Just as she had done with YUUKI, Maribel could easily bring him under her rule, with him none the wiser. She had not one, but two ways of doing this. The first was to overwrite the target's desires with Maribel's own, making them into a cooperative partner with the same goals. This approach had a weakness: she needed to be within conversational distance of the target to trigger it. Plus, like a slow-acting poison, it took a certain amount of time to take full effect. If she didn't want to arouse the target's suspicion, she'd have to make several contacts with them to make it seem more natural, and since the conversation would need a reason to take place, there was only so much desire she could inject at once. It required a major time commitment. The second approach, meanwhile, went much faster. It involved using Avarice to force the target to accept her rule. A quick injection of greed could even destroy the target's self-awareness, turning them into a living puppet. This, of course, was much more dangerous. Depending on the size of the target's desire, this approach could also take some time, and even if it only took a few seconds, that'd be more than enough for someone as powerful as the Demon Lord Rimuru to kill Maribel. Taking this tactic required very careful preparation, which was why Maribel immediately gave up on it against Granville. Those were the two ways Avarice could take over a person. And given the way that it worked on people's primordial desires, there wasn't a soul in this world that could resist it. The main drawback was its dependency on time, not to mention the size of the target's desire. No matter which approach she took, Maribel couldn't take over a target unless they had a certain amount of desire inside them. The larger that desire, the firmer the grip Maribel could have over them. But what if the desire wasn't big enough? Given that Avarice controlled people's desires, if there wasn't much to work with, the skill couldn't influence them enough to be successful. She could prod that desire, inflating it enough so she could take hold, but again, that took time and opened her up to suspicion. That was why she couldn't take over the mind of Hinata the Saint. Maybe she could if they met more often, but Hinata would have questioned her motives if she kept popping in for no reason. Maribel couldn't risk that much danger, so she gave up on the effort. On the other hand, she held regular secret meetings with YUUKI through Johann the Elder. Seizing his mind was easy. Now her main question was Rimuru. I saw him up close, but he didn't seem to have much desire despite all his outrageous behavior. It's not fair. At the dinner banquet, she had a direct view of Rimuru. With that insight, she felt what might be just barely enough to rule over his desires. With a desire that small, she could take it over quickly with just a few sessions, but it wouldn't give her much overall influence on his behavior. Of course, once she got that foothold, the rest would come falling down after it, she figured. If worse came to worst, she could use her final option. If that worked, the Demon Lord would be Maribel's to use as she pleased, and since Rimuru had tamed Veldora, the Storm Dragon would essentially be hers to control as well. A dragon even the supreme being Lubelius feared. An attractive prize, to be certain. Best to keep up my observations for now. Then I can consider my options and come up with the safest approach to subdue him. Her mind made up, it was time to concoct a strategy. YUUKI advised against direct confrontation with Rimuru. That's why the Demon Lord Kazalim, under the guise of Kigali, would be guiding him through the ruins. Those ruins had their dangers, but apparently Kigali had no intention of putting Rimuru in harm's way inside them. She could use that as part of her game plan.
Let's send him a letter. We can invite Rimuru to the council and see how he reacts.
You think the Demon Lord would agree to it?
No worries there. Joining the Council of the West is one of his burning desires.
How curious.
Well, Rimuru wants to work hand in hand with humans. He wants to prove that the monsters under him are harmless as long as we stick to his rules.
YUUKI's explanation made sense to Maribel, as dumb as it sounded to her. Being bound by rules meant losing your freedom. Doing away with your Demon Lord military force? Staying on the same tier as the human race? It seemed supremely stupid to her.
So why don't we make that dream come true? Then I can inject him with my poison.
said Maribel.
Ooh, scary. Isn't Yuki Kagurazaka just as strong as Hinata the Saint? If he and Rimuru fought for real, he has good prospects to win, I think. But now that you have him, you want a demon lord as well?
Yuki's ambition is too strong. He doesn't even realize I'm controlling him. He thinks he's making these negotiations out of his own free will.
As Maribel explained right in front of Yuki himself, this was a happy thing for him. Her rule over him meant that he wouldn't be pushed down by any excessive greed. Yuki ignored it all, not responding to it. That was how perfect her domination was of him.
And I'm sure the Demon Lord Rimuru is like a child before you, Maribel. And you'll have full control of him?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just worried that your rule could be broken, somehow.
She flashed a cold look at the flustered Johan.
There's no need to worry about that. Once I cloud someone's desires, they'll never return to normal. Not unless you overwrite the desires I implant in them.
Maribel was greed personified, enough so to cultivate the unique skill avarice within her. There was nobody in the world who could desire something more. She was fully convinced of that, and it made her laugh off Johan's concern.
Yes, I imagine not. I trust in you on that, Maribel.
Johan the Elder tried not to invite Maribel's wrath upon him. She was the de facto number 2 after Granville, and not even an elder was safe around her. If he got on her bad side, she might try to control his mind next. He had made a blood oath with Granville to avoid that, but once Maribel took over, he didn't think he could rely on that oath too much. Thus, he never dared to lift a finger against her.
Everything we say in here is a secret, all right?
Of course, Maribel. I'm not in any hurry to die.
Smart decision.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shoutout to Night Gazer, Rahul Subramanian, Chami Chami, Hexelus Lux, Chadvota, Fennec Foxy, Wilfred Miller, Carl Edison Ferrer, Shahrukh Khan, and last but not the least, shoutout to Paul Smith. I'll see you guys in the next video.